Peace, Love, Liberty Radio version 4.1. Initializing upgrades. Accessing peace. Existing without violence, with the ability to calmly resolve conflict. Downloading love. An overwhelming, deep, positive affection towards others. Activating liberty. Living your life as you see fit without infringing on the lives of others.
Ashes to ashes, we're falling down. Slaves to the men that stole the crown. There's a warning sign, like a blazing sun. You don't want to see because you're having fun. But those who control all the information celebrate and lie to the people to keep them watching.
Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, and today is Wednesday. That means it's the day that I answer your questions, and boy, do I have a lot of them, and I love it, love it, love it, and I will do my best to get through all of them. I will begin with something that I touched on Friday because the question came almost immediately after the show last Wednesday. And it's something that, I have kind of been aware of, but did not realize that it was, actually an issue, if that makes any sense. So the question is, why is your audio cutting in and out? The EQ and the tones are good, but there's intermittent loss of audio at times, fractions of seconds when it occurs. We listen to you mainly on YouTube, and the issue can be heard during episode 367. And as I mentioned on Friday, I think it has something to do with having an older computer that, probably I definitely need to update and wind up getting something with more RAM. And I don't know. There's something that is running. I don't know if it's something in Firefox that after the latest system update, just the computer will randomly freeze. And so I've started trying to get away from using Firefox, and I'm using another browser, Brave. If you've not heard of it, it's... I don't care about the weird feature of, we'll pay people Bitcoin for something. But it's, got a built-in ad blocker. And in a lot of ways, it's very similar to Opera. And I could just use Opera, but for a couple of things, I found that the Brave browser works and the Opera browser not so much for a couple of things. So, that's what I'm trying to use primarily and see if that winds up solving the problem. Again, I think ultimately I'm just going to wind up having to, bite the bullet and throw a couple $100 down and just get a new laptop. And maybe I'll, get something that I use only as the recording device and, have another laptop that I use for everything else. I don't know. So there's that. There's also the thing of I think I might have a bad mic cable. So I literally just ordered a new mic cable. That will not fix the things where audio just disappears, but there is another issue that I am aware of to where every now and then the audio just seems to stop. Like, it's not that the audio goes away and you lose seconds. It's just that it stops recording, and I think it might be that the connection from the microphone to the cable might be bad. So it could, hopefully it's just the cable that's $10 or $11 and not the microphone that's probably closer to 40 or 50 or more, depending on what quality microphone you wind up getting. So the next question, because today is Wednesday, there's the question. Why is Wednesday spelled and spoken the way it is? And this is something that, honestly, it interests me because I like, learning the etymology of words. And the word Wednesday is derived from the Old English word Woensdag, which literally translates to the Day of Woden. In Middle English, it was Wednesday, spelled D-E-I at the end instead of D-A-Y. So, yeah, it's a sort of transliteration of a transliteration, if that makes any sense. Who is Woden, you might be asking? Well, Woden is another name for Odin, who you have probably heard of. Definitely have if you ever watched the television show Vikings. Odin, or Woden, in Germanic and Norse mythology, was a very revered god, from which stems most of our information about the god, or rather, most of our information about the god comes from Norse mythology. Odin is associated with healing, death, royalty, the gallows, knowledge, battle, sorcery, poetry, frenzy, and the runic alphabet. Odin, or Woden, is also the husband of the goddess Frigg, the namesake of the day Friday. In wider Germanic mythology and paganism, Odin was also called Woden, that had several spelling variants. Next on the list of questions is, what do you think of this? And it's a link to an article from Slate. The article was mentioned on an episode of the Lava Flow podcast, so apologies if you've already spoken on it. I'm a regular listener and love the show. Thanks for all you do. And the article is about this weird interpretation of a really bad, poorly written law in Arizona. The title of the article, "If you change a baby's diaper in Arizona, you can now be convicted of child molestation." Now, let me skip into the article a little bit. They say, how did this happen? Well, it was a combination of bad legislation and terrible judging. Start with the legislature, which passed a law forbidding any person from intentionally or knowingly touching any part of the genitals, anus, or female breast of a child under the age of 15. Notice something odd about that wording? Although the law calls such contact child molestation or sexual abuse, the statute does not require the touching to be sexual in nature. So, cleaning your baby's bottom could wind up being sexual molestation in Arizona. Now, the court did rule that you could use a defense of, I was not intending to blah, blah, blah. But again, that then winds up presuming you guilty until you prove yourself innocent. Full link will be in the show notes. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $1 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com.
Cell 411 is a free app for Android and iOS that replaces government-controlled 911. Cell 411 allows you to preset a group of friends or private organizations to show up in any emergency. Cell 411 is a nightmare for the state because it proves their so-called services aren't needed. Cell 411 has had thousands of installs, and of course it's covered by the BIPCOT no government license. Cell 411 because your friends won't shoot you when you're in trouble. Without the government, who would build the emergency services? You and Cell 411. Get it today at getcell411.com. That's getcell411.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. Continuing through the list of questions. And yes, I would like to spend a little bit longer talking about the weird thing from Arizona. But again, I've got a fairly lengthy list of questions that I want to make sure that I'm able to get through. Next question, who was the nation's first president? Have you ever heard about there being presidents before George Washington? Why would such information be suppressed? Also, we do not, but do you support Gary Johnson? If so, why? If not, who are you currently planning to vote for? So, several questions in amongst that. So, the question, who was the nation's first president? I have to pause to sort of ask for clarification here to say, in what manner are you asking? And you might think that I'm being, a bit, what's the word? Pedantic is what I often get called in polite company, instead of smart A. But no, it's a serious question. In what way are you asking? Because there were people that were the presidents of the Continental Congress, and then there were people under the Articles of Confederation, which is a document that most high school kids probably have heard of but don't know much about. The Articles of Confederation was the Constitution governing the United States of America before the current Constitution of the United States of America. And under the Articles of Confederation, there were people who had the title President of the United States in Congress assembled. Now, while, yes, it had the word president in the title, it was not necessarily the same as the President of the United States under this current Constitution. And you might be asking, well, how is it different? Well, let me just give you a little bit of info here. The President of the Congress, or rather the President of the United States in Congress assembled, was the presiding officer over Congress, basically the Speaker of the House in modern comparison. He also chaired what was called the Committee of the States when Congress was in recess. He performed other administrative functions, but he was not an executive in the same way that the President of the United States under the current Constitution is the chief executive of the federal government. So it was more of an elevated administrative legislative position, if that makes any sense, to where he was, like the top legislator, but he was not the executive, because under the Articles of Confederation, there was not an executive, a legislative, and a judicial. So, yes, there was the title president, but again, it was President of the United States in Congress assembled. Now, there were several men that held that position. First was Samuel Huntington, then Thomas McKeon. John Hanson was the first man to have that position for almost a full year. Took office November 5th, 1781. Left office November 3rd, 1782. Basically a year, right? And then Elias Boudinot, Thomas Mifflin, Richard Henry Lee. You may recognize that surname. Yeah, that's because he's the grandfather of Robert E. Lee. John Hancock, another name you recognize. Nathaniel Gorman, Arthur St. Clair, and Cyrus Griffin. Cyrus Griffin being the last man to hold the title President of the United States in Congress assembled. Now, the presidents of the Continental Congress were Peyton Randolph, Henry Middleton. Peyton Randolph, again, Randolph served a total of 63 days between those two terms. Middleton served 5 days. John Hancock, Henry Laurens, John Jay was the last man to, John Jay, Samuel Huntington, and then, so Samuel Huntington's term here was split between President of the Continental Congress and President of the United States in Congress assembled. So John Jay, the last man to serve as President of the Continental Congress and not then become the President of the United States in Congress assembled. Now, the question also says, why would this information be suppressed? I don't think it's suppressed because you can go to a lot of different places to find the information. It's in, various almanacs. But again, because it's not a direct predecessor of the office of President of the United States under this Constitution, that might be why it appears to be suppressed, because it's really a completely different office. The next part of this question is, we do not, but do you support Gary Johnson? No, I don't. If so, why not? Well, because Gary has a lot of positions that are not libertarian. In fact, Gary on his website admits to not being a philosophical libertarian and, weighing things against the greater good, if you will. If I'm not supporting Gary, who am I planning to vote for and why? Well, I have resumed my presidential campaign to some extent. I have filed as a declared write-in candidate in a few places, and the state where I am a voter, here in New Hampshire, does not have write-in declaration, meaning that all write-in votes are considered to be valid. Now, whether or not they actually get tabulated the way the law says is a completely different question, but I do intend to go into the polling booth on November 8th and write in Darryl W. Perry on the presidential ballot line. The next question has to also do with government, and I will ask the question now, but I will answer it in just moments because there's not time to answer the question now. The question is, Darryl, can you tell us what is going on in Spain with regards to their government or lack thereof and your opinions? Thank you. Now, you may have seen some headlines. You may, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not sure what news outlets you read, but there's headlines going around that say Spaniards exhausted by politics warm to life without government. And headline from Misa, Spain is without a national government and Spaniards are digging it. As the old saying goes, I'll tell you the rest of the story.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davy Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com, all major bookstores, and now available as an audiobook. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry, online at fppradio.com.
Hey, welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. So what in the world is going on in Spain? Well, the headlines are that they're without a government. But what exactly does that mean? Well, I'll tell you as soon as I tell you what it means to be without gold and silver. It means that you've not called Roberts & Roberts Brokerage yet to buy some gold and silver, and people have been doing that for nearly 40 years. Since 1977, people have been trusting Roberts & Roberts Brokerage for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver, and Roberts & Roberts takes Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760. Or visit online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. So what is going on in Spain? The brief story from the Mises Institute says, with neither major party able to secure a majority of seats in the national legislature and the two parties unable to agree on a coalition government for the last 10 months, Spain has had a do-nothing caretaker government for the first time in its history. While basic services continue, no new legislation is being proposed, foreign policy is stuck in place, and many infrastructure and other government projects are frozen. In contrast to dire predictions of chaos, everything is proceeding smoothly, and Spaniards are learning a valuable lesson about the resilience of society when left to its own voluntary devices. There's a quote here from Felix Pastor, a language teacher in Spain. He says, "No government, no thieves." Well, that's not exactly true. And see, this is one of the oddities, again, about the English language. To where in the United States, when we think no government, we don't think, oh, the legislature is, not doing anything right now. We think there's no tax man, there's no bureaucracies, the roads aren't getting paved, the schools aren't functioning, and, nobody's getting a Social Security check, nobody's getting welfare because there is no government. Well, in parliamentary systems, when they say they're without a government, what they actually mean, and again, it was mentioned sort of haphazardly and flippantly in the article from Mises, what it actually means is that the parliament has not organized. It would be akin to, we've got elections coming up in about a month. It would be akin to, after the election, we know the results, and the legislature is supposed to convene that first Monday in January, and they then can't decide who the speaker is going to be. And they can't decide the majority leader, because let's just say that for whatever reason, neither major political party winds up with the majority of the seats, and they're not tied, with, each having the same number of seats, because that did happen in the Senate a few years ago, to where they were tied and they came to this sort of power-sharing deal. But let's say that the Republicans in the federal Congress, the Republicans get 212 representatives, the Democrats get 213 representatives, and then the other, I'm doing math off the top of my head, so 12 plus 13 is 25. The other 10 members of the U.S. House of Representatives come from, say, the Green Party and a couple libertarians and maybe a Constitution Party guy. And nobody can then organize enough people to wind up having a majority of the legislature. So in the parliamentary systems, if nobody winds up winning a majority of the seats, they can still, quote-unquote, form a government by bringing in minor parties. And then, at any time, those minor parties could say, we're withdrawing our consent. We want a, vote on whether or not you should still be the prime minister. And they can basically force a vote of no confidence. Well, we don't have that in our legislative system. So, again, when they say no government, they're just meaning that the parliament is not functioning because they have not organized, and nobody has decided to wind up calling what are referred to as snap elections. And again, that's something that exists in parliamentary systems, but not in our American system. The final question, hey, Wolfman, got another one for you. What do you think about nihilism? You don't have to go in depth, but I do enjoy the personal stuff and would love to hear your perspective. So nihilism, I talked about briefly last week in the question about what's the meaning of life. And I gave, various thoughts from various sort of schools of thought, if you will. And one of those is nihilism. And I've got a brief sentence here that I want to share about nihilism. It comes from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It says, while few philosophers would claim to be nihilist, nihilism is often associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, who argued that its corrosive effects would eventually destroy all moral, religious, and metaphysical convictions and precipitate the greatest crisis in human history. And I agree. If you think that everything is meaningless, then that's bad. That is really bad. because then you don't respect your fellow man.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of Fiend Phone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve Fiend Phone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
Fiend Phone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
This is Paige Peterson from Made Safe, and you're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. And I can't believe I did it. I got through all of these questions. Appears to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 questions that I got through on this episode of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. And again, some of these I could have gotten into a little bit deeper. Others I think I spent about the right amount of time on. Now, just one more thing that I want to mention about the nihilism question. Let me reread this sentence from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy because the music sort of cut in there. It says, while few philosophers would claim to be nihilist, nihilism is often associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, who argued that its corrosive effects would eventually destroy all moral, religious, and metaphysical convictions and precipitate the greatest crisis in human history. Now, most people think that Nietzsche was fond of nihilism because he's, sort of the father of nihilism. But even he was saying, hey, wait a second. If you're this pessimistic about things, then it can be really, really bad. So, a little bit of pessimism and skepticism is good, but when you think that nothing has any meaning, then you start to not value other human beings, and that is not a society or a world that I want to live in. Now, what kind of society or world do I want to live in? Well, I want to live in a free, peaceful society where all humans have equal rights. And if there is a government that the only thing that it does is protect life, liberty, and justly acquired property. Now, I'm not advocating for the existence of government because I think I'm perfectly capable of governing myself. But if a government is to exist, as the old saying goes, I want it to be small enough to where it can drown in a bathtub. And, well, I'm actually, doing something to advocate for that. First off, I moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, where the pledge is to move and exert the fullest practical effort towards the creation of a society where the maximum role of government is the protection of life, liberty, and justly acquired property. I'm also a lobbyist, and I've been going to the State House regularly for about 3.5 years, and you can learn more about my lobbyist efforts at libertylobby.xyz, and if you become a monthly contributor before the end of October, you will get added to the Founders Committee, libertylobby.xyz. And don't forget, every Wednesday I answer your questions. Send those over, ama@fppradio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copy Heart. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the fan Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News, and also get a copy of the monthly newspaper FPP News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.